Well, now we are tracking some legal updates, and this is a breaking input. Now, Supreme Court is all set to pronounce a judgment on the petitions challenging the constitutional and legal validity of the Electoral Bonds scheme. Now, questions over transparency of this entire scheme were raised during a couple of hearings. So today, the Supreme Court, the Apex Court, is all set to pronounce the judgment on the petitions challenging the constitutional and legal validity of the Electoral Bonds scheme. Remember, this scheme was proposed in the year 2018. Now, joining us on the broadcast is our legal correspondent, Ananya. A very good morning, Ananya. What are the expectations of the petitioners and those defending the Electoral Bonds scheme as the verdict nears?
Well, definitely, this is a very significant verdict that is to come in right before the election season begins in the country. And a very, very key verdict coming in from a 5-judges bench of the Supreme Court headed by the Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud himself. Remember, when these hearings had taken place, the petitioners had constantly argued that, this is a scheme that somewhere or the other legitimizes kickbacks, and it is a scheme where anonymity is playing a very, very wrong frame, because we don't even know where these political parties are getting funding, and somewhere or the other, big corporate houses are somewhere or the other paying kickbacks by way of these electoral bonds, is what the petitioners had argued. However, the government had defended that particular scheme, clearly saying that, if at all the element of anonymity goes from the electoral bond scheme, then there would be a hesitation from the people from donating, and it might, gear out their political inclination, and that's the reason why this scheme has been kept anonymous. In fact, it was also stated that this electoral bond scheme was not the only measure that was taken to tackle black money into electoral processes, but it can be taken as one of those measures that were taken to actually tackle the black money issue. And there are various other methods that were also adopted along with the electoral bond scheme. It should not be seen standalone, is what the central government stated. In fact, the Supreme Court had also made certain observation, clearly saying that somewhere or the other this does legitimize this kickback. How much of it does it play up before the Supreme Court, whether or not the Supreme Court quashes this particular scheme, whether there would be certain changes that would be suggested into that scheme? All these questions will be answered at 10:30 when the 5-judges bench headed by the Chief Justice of India himself would be pronouncing this particular verdict. But definitely the government has kept on defending this particular scheme, which was rolled out in 2018, and a very, very important scheme for the government, because not only for the government, all political parties. In fact, a very, very clear argument that the petitioners had gone on to make up while these petitions were being heard was that 60% of in fact the contributions that had come in through the electoral bond scheme were for the Bharatiya Janata Party, that is the ruling government. However, the centre had defended that any party who is the ruling government would actually get more of it, because the people have more faith in that particular political party, is what the centre had said while defending it. But how much of it does it play up, whether or not the decision would be in the favour of in fact the government or not, we'll get to know at 10:30 today. But two major questions would be answered by the Supreme Court today: whether or not bringing the electoral bond scheme via the Finance Act, directly bypassing one of the houses of the parliament, was it correct or not? Secondly, whether that element of anonymity has to go from the electoral bond scheme, whether it's illegal or not. All these questions would be answered very, very soon when the Supreme Court begins to pronounce its judgment in a short while from now. Kuina.
Right, Ananya, thank you so much for bringing in all those details.